Taoiseach, as we know, in March 1983, the Chief Prison Officer of Portlaoise Prison, Brian Stack, was shot in the back of the neck. He was the only prison officer in the Republic to be murdered during the Troubles by the Provisional IRA, and he died in September 1984 as a result of his injuries. Now, it has been revealed, Taoiseach, that the leader of Sinn Féin, Gerry Adams, wrote to the Garda Commissioner in February last, naming 4 people who he said he understood to be suspects in the murder of Brian Stack. Now, what is extraordinary is, of course, that he claims that the sons of Brian Stack, Austin and Oliver, gave him those names back in 2013. The Stack brothers resolutely deny that. They never gave names to Deputy Adams. But why didn't Deputy Adams, if he had the names in 2013, give the names to the Garda Commissioner in 2013? Why did he wait 2.5 years later to give it to the Garda Commissioner if he was anxious to cooperate with a live murder inquiry? And the other key point I would ask Taoiseach you to consider, that what happened in 2013 in itself is extraordinary, that the leader of a parliamentary party in this House would take 2 young men in a blacked-out van to an undisclosed location somewhere near the border to meet an IRA man who tells them, "We've carried out an investigation. It was a senior IRA person who authorised the murder of your dad. We've disciplined him." Doesn't say how he was disciplined, and we regret what happened and we apologise. And that should be the end of the matter. Now, did Deputy Adams send the name of the person he met with the Stack sons to the Gardaí? Has the name of that individual, who clearly has a lot of knowledge about the murder of Brian Stack, has his name been sent to the Gardaí? Deputy Adams says he took notes of the meeting, that this individual was a friend of his who knew what happened. Have those notes been sent to the Garda Commissioner of the meeting with this individual who, 30 years after the murder, eventually acknowledged the IRA's authorisation and murder of Brian Stack? I think it's an extraordinary situation that the leader of a parliamentary party would be taking 2 individuals in a blacked-out van to an undisclosed location to reveal how somebody was murdered, or that somebody murdered somebody, and that the matter should rest there. This is a live murder inquiry, and I'm putting it to you, Taoiseach. Do you think it's acceptable? And are you satisfied that full cooperation is being given to the Gardaí in relation to all of the information and names that Deputy Adams has, and in relation to bringing this murder investigation to a proper conclusion? I think it's absolutely unacceptable in any normal parliamentary democracy that activity of this sort should continue as late as 2013 to 2016.
I do not accept that this is in any way acceptable. Nobody can doubt that Brian Stack, late Brian Stack, served this state with honour in his role as a prison officer. The work that he and his colleagues did in protecting this state was vital during that troubled period. And his murder, cold-blooded murder at the hands of Provisional IRA thugs, was a cowardly and a brutal and an utterly unjustifiable act of pointless violence and should be properly condemned by everybody. Now, if you were in this situation, Deputy Martin, or I was in this situation, where there was an allegation made like this, where names were given and supplied of serving public representatives who were involved, allegedly, in this murder, then it just wouldn't be acceptable that we could expect that something happened and it was all forgotten about. Kangaroo courts are never a replacement for the laws of the land. Never, never can be. And it's utterly contradictory, and I can't answer the question for you as to whether the person who apparently is known and living outside the country who carried out this murder was ever spoken to, was ever disciplined, was ever understood to have carried out this murder, and that name given to the Gardaí. And it is for Deputy Adams, the President of his party and the leader of his party, to deal with this. It is utterly unacceptable that a man was shot dead in the back of the neck outside the boxing club and died quite some time afterwards. And that all these years later we hear of names being supplied of persons who were allegedly involved. Now, I can't comment on the operational matters that are going on here, Lascan Corla. This is a live murder investigation under the direction of the Commissioner of the Guards. And obviously the Gardaí are conducting their investigation. I don't know whether the persons mentioned in the supply of names given by Deputy Adams have been spoken to by the Gardaí, though I do have to accept that they will do their utmost to bring about the truth here. But understand this, Lascan Corla. A man was murdered in cold blood. His alleged murderer is still at large. Disciplined or not by the Provisional IRA is no substitute for the laws of this land, for the laws of this state that we all espouse. And I do not find it acceptable, in answer to your question, Deputy Martin. It is utterly unacceptable. And those who know should come forward and tell the truth.
Deputy Martin, 1 minute.
For his reply, and I just want to refer you, Taoiseach, to comments made by Austin Stack again recently, when he said that, and I quote, Gerry Adams brought us in a blacked-out van to see an IRA leader who he said he trusted. So Deputy Adams trusted this person and was a friend. He continued by saying that Deputy Adams told us and reaffirmed this in the media last week, that he asked this IRA leader to carry out an investigation. So an investigation was carried out internally. Mr. Stack said, quote, this man told us that he knew who murdered my father, that the perpetrators were still alive, and that one of them had been disciplined, unquote. He continued, Gerry Adams knows this man, and unless he has given his name to the Gardaí, then he's withholding information. And clearly, as Mr. Stack has said, this IRA leader reported back to Deputy Adams in terms of the investigation. Now, it is by any measure extraordinary stuff when you just stand back from it and think about it and reflect on it. That if any one of us outside of this went off and said we know who murdered somebody, we actually checked out to get someone to investigate it, it comes back to us and tells nobody for 2.5 years. Allegedly, he had the 4 names. He allegedly had those names. He was given them in 2013, he says, and he doesn't tell anyone until February of this year because they were raised in a general election. I mean, this is murder. This isn't about an election campaign or trying to box clever in the middle of a campaign. This is about, you said it, Taoiseach, there's a man at large here. The Provos know who did it, but they're not being accountable in this House. And our parliamentary representatives aren't being accountable in this House. Yet they expect everybody else to be accountable on every other issue in relation to injustices that have been perpetrated on many citizens on this island.
Thank you.
They're living in a parallel universe where rules apply to one group but not to anybody else, and it's unacceptable. I put that to you.
Well, this is not fiction. A man was murdered in cold blood. His killer is at large. People know who that murderer is. It's beyond comprehension that a member of the House can drive somebody in a blacked-out van to meet somebody to say, we're going to talk about who shot your father. And the names are given to the Garda Commissioner, and that the son of the murdered man said, I didn't supply those. Now, I think that Deputy Gerry Adams knows more about this than certainly I do. And while this investigation is going on into a murder, perhaps Deputy Adams might, in the privilege of this House, make a statement and clear it up for everybody. I intend to meet Austin Stack, myself. I know that he met with the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade last weekend with his family. This is a very serious matter, and it's one that deserves to be cleared up for once and for all. A murderer is at large. People know who he is.